Initializing Next Life System. System ready.
What is going on, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Next Life. Today we're going to be talking specifically about the neuroscience of creativity and how we, as a culture, we may be actually perceiving that process completely wrong. And why I say that is because that common, I guess, comparison of the brain, the left versus right brain, where the left brain is seen as more of the analytical processes, more of like the rigid, like very practical, grounded way of thinking, whereas the right brain is seen as more of the creative, the free-spirited, the imaginative, the more of the intuitive processes, right? We all have heard that, and a lot of us believe that to be the truth. But what is interesting is that there's actually a lot of cognitive neuroscientists that disagree with that notion and say that it's actually completely wrong and generalizes things well beyond any point of truth, and that there's actually a much different way of perceiving how we actually utilize our creative processes, and so today I actually want to look into that. I know personally, whenever someone says I'm not a creative person or I'm a left brain person, I don't. It's for me, it's just it doesn't really resonate, just because one, I feel that everyone is creative, and there's so many ways of using your creativity, and just because you're more of a grounded thinker or more of a practical analytical person doesn't mean that you're not creative at all. Secondly, it really just doesn't make sense that you would only be using, or we would only be using one side of your brain predominantly. Basically, I'm gonna show you guys how this actually works, or how neuroscientists see it now. They actually see creativity as basically a combination of us using three different types of networks, or these brain networks that essentially relay information in different ways. They work together in kind of I guess I would say more of a holographic, or more of a holistic way, rather than a right or left side. Although these areas of the brain are on the right and left side, they're not all just on one side or the other. So let's jump into looking at those networks, and I'll kind of show how this looks. So there are a bunch of different brain networks in our body, and they control and help control and function different things. The specific ones that we're going to be looking at today are called the executive control network. That's the first one, the imagination network, and the salience network. So these three areas they essentially are active during different aspects of creative thought. So it's we go from preparation to incubation to illumination and then verification. There's these different processes of how we think and interact with our ideas, and so because of that, we actually are constantly using different parts of our brain, and so these different networks are associated with these different levels of thought. So the first network that I'm going to bring up is the executive network, and let me just pull that one up for you guys here. So the executive network, if you look, it's in the green. So as I said, in a couple different parts of the brain. Now the executive network is very much focused on very laser-like focused thought. So it's the kind that's activated when you're in class and you're really trying to focus on a challenging lecture, or you're engaging in a complex problem solving matter, or you're really putting your reason to work, and you're putting heavy demands on your memory. These type of processes activate those parts of your brain, the executive network. Specifically, it's the lateral regions of your prefrontal cortex and the areas that are posterior of the parietal lobe. And so, essentially, these are definitely more analytically focused, but they're still very creative in their own sense. They're more of fine-tuning ideas and figuring out where those ideas fit into the, I guess I would say, the puzzle pieces. Like they're like taking puzzle pieces and seeing where they fit, and using kind of logical, more analytical thought, but creative thought nonetheless, to do that. So that's the first network. The second network is the imagination network, and as you may have guessed, it has to do with using your imagination and imagining possibilities. This one is, they quoted here, it's about constructing dynamic simulations based on past personal experiences, such as used during remembering, thinking about the future, and generally when imagining alternative perspectives and scenarios to the present. So we use this a lot when we use they call our social cognition. So it's active when we are imagining about what someone else might be thinking. It's very much our intuitive type of thought. It's like our improvised thought. If you've ever played an instrument and you're just kind of like playing it off the cuff, you're probably using this specific network. This one specifically is inside the prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe, and it communicates with various aspects of the parietal cortex as well. So that is the second network, and then the last network is the salience network. And as you can see, the salience network is right in the middle there, and it's kind of pushing information to both sides. Or these other networks, the default mode network that's listed right up there, that's actually another name for the the imaginative network. So the salience network essentially it's monitoring things that are happening outside of you, and as well as the internal stream of consciousness that is within you. And so it's basically flexibly passing information from from the imagination to the executive network, so that you can essentially discover information and then immediately go ahead and really understand, like, okay, what information do I want to keep? How do I, like, basically it's where you can move from incubation to illumination to verification mode. We're like verifying, is this information I've discovered useful, or what is useful, and what do I need to throw away, and how do I structure this? So the salience network is really helping to kind of guide that specific process that's involved there. So those are the three there. And how my question is, like, how it's like, okay, so we get how these three work, like, how are they, like, more specifically working together? And I kind of already, went into that, but basically different systems are activated for different processes. And, like, basically, like, if let's say you want to it's like you want to start a business and you want to figure out new ideas for that. When you're really trying to brainstorm something, it's hard to brainstorm when you're just, like, sitting at your desk and, like, really, like, trying to logically think about what it is that you want to do, or want to come up with an idea, right? So, like, if you're trying to really get into, like, a brainstorm state, or, like, you're really trying to come up with new ideas, it's best if you actually shut off your executive mind and turn on the imagination network. And actually, apparently, it's a combination of the imagination network and the salience network together that works best for essentially, like, loosening up your associations and letting your mind roam a bit more free, and basically that's what allows you to imagine these possibilities. Now, once you've come up with a bunch of ideas and imagined a bunch of possibilities, it's best to actually turn off the imagination network and then move back into the executive network. So basically that's the point where it's like, okay, I have all these ideas, great. Now what ideas am I going to use? And basically, like, how do I need to critically evaluate these so that I can actually implement them in real life? So I think there's a lot of us that, like, will get caught up in utilizing or favoring different networks of our brain, or maybe even just forgetting that, like, the creative process involves these three different networks, and it's heavily focused on the executive and the imagination network. And, like, these, again, as we were affirming before, they're not, like, left or right brain. They're, they both consist of both sides of the brain, but they do have these specific kind of dominant focuses involved. So that's the main thing that I want to bring up. I thought it was pretty fascinating. It's definitely something that interests me, and I'm gonna have to look more into that. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's all I got for today. I'll be back on tomorrow. Thank you all for watching, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of the day. Peace and love.